Hey, did you know that Two Girls Shooting the Shit is on Instagram and Facebook? We'd love to hear your feedback, episode suggestions, or just chat with you about life. So follow, comment, and share.
I mean, my point was is that like when I was growing up, the boxes were there, and for all I knew, those boxes were made of stone. You
Hmm.
know that there's the boy box and the girl box. You know, and if you wanted to get out of the boy box and you were assigned male at birth, then you were gay, and you know that had to be nipped in the bud. You know.
What's up, Em?
I'm out of it.
Girl.
I'm so out of it today.
Hey,
Sorry.
girl.
My son has a fever, so we've been up all night, so it's just a thing. Okay.
Poor boo.
Are we starting?
Yeah, girl.
Is this a start? Have we started?
Start, girl.
Hey Mo, how are you?
Hey, alive.
Okay, that's good. That's the goal, right?
I guess. Speaking of being alive, we have a special guest today. Made it past the hump.
Oh my goodness. Who do we have today?
We have my good friend Laura here today to talk to us. Laura, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on. Yeah, we go way back. Both were New York City teaching fellows. Then Monique wandered around the world and the known universe. Came back and actually lived in my house. It was like
Roomies.
a couple of years. Yeah, we were roomies.
Cool.
Yeah, it was the year you got married.
Here I got married.
Yeah.
Who got married?
Emily got married.
Emily. I had actually been married I'd been married for a while. We reconnected. The interesting thing about it is that she wasn't, or at least she didn't seem terribly freaked out. I'm transgender. So I've been transitioning for about the past 3 years or so. My ex found out about this on LinkedIn. And she was like, I didn't know. I'm like, oh, well, there you go. It's interesting to reconnect after such a major change. So yes, that's the major change.
Do you think it was really wanting to reconnect, or just kind of being nosy, like, ooh, I need more tea on this?
Probably a bit of both, you know. I wonder how she's going to react. But she was good about it. But yeah, so I've been transitioning, I guess, for the past 3 years now, I think. And Monique has always been there by my side, a friend
She's
and
good.
ally. Yes, a friend and ally in my journey across the gender fence, so to speak. You know, like everybody else, I'm just sort of like holding up for COVID. I got my shot.
Wait, what did you say?
Holding up.
No, you better stop. Holing, like hole, like being in the house.
Like hole.
Yeah, you said hoeing up.
You were hoeing it up.
Hoeing up. Well, I mean, you know,
that
comes
as much as we can in the pandemic.
That comes late. That comes later.
Oh my gosh. That's too much.
Oh Jesus! When everyone has their vaccines, and they open up the nightlife. I'm
staying inside.
I know, it's so funny because everybody is all concerned about a COVID vaccine, but they forget there's no HIV vaccine, So it's like you still need to be cautious and take precautions and things, but I think we're going to see, a spike. I don't know, this is just a guess, but I think we're going to see a spike in other things. People have been in the wild.
In everything.
I mean, they haven't been out in the wild, so they'll be.
Well, I know you're not being a killjoy exactly here, Monique. I will be, I will be very prudent in this brave new world. Yeah. The other interesting thing about me that maybe we can talk about is I have a very odd background. For years I've worked in information technology during the day, but I have a doctorate in philosophy, and lately I've sort of been getting back into that, delivering papers at conferences and, seminars at my church. It's sort of helped in my journey in a number of ways too. This has been like a big change for me. It's one that's actually been brewing since I was like 5 years old. It's funny that most of the trans people I know.
That's what I wanted to ask.
They will say it's like 5 years. Yeah, I knew when it was like, I was like 5.
Mm-hmm. What did you know? I'm diving in.
There was a lack of fit between the gender I was socialized in and the gender that my biology suggested I was part of and how I felt. I always thought there was sort of a lack of fit. As I grew older, first of all, there's also tremendous repression involved here too on the part of parents. I grew up in the 60s, what I can remember of the 60s. I mean, most people, if you remember the 60s, you weren't a part of it. But I was like a young boy in the 1960s, and it was sort of like not a good thing to sort of suggest that maybe your brain was a girl brain. Like I remember one time my cousins came over at Christmas time and they had a doll, and they left the doll to play with my fire trucks. So I started playing with the doll, and my mother came in and was like, "Oh my God, stop playing with that. Don't let your father see this." And I'm just like,
shame, yeah.
Little baby,
yeah.
And she's like, it was always this, you're a boy, and this is crazy stuff. I mean, I guess they thought, oh, he's gay. And I mean, as I was growing up, part of my issue was, and again, this is like now the 70s, where, I was saying,
wasn't that free love?
Yeah, but it was also like gays, lesbians, queer people were not generally understood outside their communities. And I mean, I thought, I'm sexually attracted and romantically attracted to women, but, I've got a Johnson, so I can't be a lesbian. So you're just being cray cray. And I kept putting it out of my mind. I kept putting it out of my mind. But I mean, there was a tremendous.
What you resist persists.
Yeah, you don't grow out of it. That's the thing. You don't grow out of it. You may try to expunge it from your mind. It doesn't work that way. It keeps, it's like Freud says, the return of the repressed. If you repress some negative emotion, it will come back as like, pain in your face, or washing your hands till they bleed and stuff like that. Well, it kept coming back. To be honest, because this is an honest Three Girls Shooting the Shit podcast here. I mean, it caused problems. Like I'd be in bed with someone and, I would, we'd finish up and, how was it for you? And I'm thinking, I feel very guilty because I'm not telling you something. And I couldn't tell them. I felt I couldn't tell them something because it would expose me as, someone who is literally psychotic. Well, again, it was because this, you like women. Presumably you have XY chromosomes, which is also, we can get into this later, is also sort of a misnomer, because one of the things philosophy has sort of indicated to me, or has sort of helped me come to grips with my gender, is that gender is an incredibly complicated thing. It's not just simply what you have between your legs and
that's
your
sex,
that's sex. Yeah.
It's not about sex. I mean,
that's what's between your legs.
I mean, it's your sex.
It touches base with it, because like I said, every time I would have sex with a woman, I would feel, almost every time, I would feel like
a woman.
Weird and guilty. Like I'm not telling you something. Didn't you have fun? Yes, I had fun, but not the kind of fun.
Else. Yeah.
Yeah, not the.
It's that Catholic guilt.
Well, yeah.
Are you Catholic? Were you Catholic?
I was Catholic. I'm Episcopalian now. Like Robin Williams said.
Welcome.
Episcopalianism is Catholic light. It's all the ritual, half the guilt. there was a lot of that. When I would tell women this, occasionally I would my scruples would crumble, and I'd say, I have this odd desire. Don't think I'm crazy, but I have this odd desire that I think I'd rather be female. And usually 95% of the time, the women would say, oh, all right, I can understand that. You want to join the good team, but I think we're sort of at a weird moment now. I wouldn't say weird moment. We're sort of at a pivotal moment, in that, like in the 80s, 90s, and mostly the 2000s, people were beginning to understand gays and lesbians because they realized, oh, we know plenty of them and we like them and they're part of our family. And, why shouldn't they enjoy all the benefits?
Isn't that sad?
Marriage. Well, yeah.
Because it's like that meme, that meme that says you shouldn't have to be related to a woman to respect her. It's kind of the same thing. You shouldn't have to be related to a trans woman to respect her. Same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was also sort of like there was an extra added fun element in Catholicism, which was that sex is for making babies. But that too, when you start to sort of pick at the fabric, it starts to unravel because, most of the time when fertile heterosexual couples have sex, they don't get pregnant, but they have sex anyway. And you don't have to have, how can I circumlocute this to get this on? But it doesn't have to be fucking. Right. It doesn't have to be fucking. It doesn't have to be fucking to be like sex.
Just easily controlled people. Sorry, definitely my face, but easily controlled people. They have that. This is what I call it. I can't articulate it, but it's that get in trouble mentality. And it's like you can't trick God,
No. The thing about the Catholics is that Catholics always had this sort of, how can I say this? So I say sort of somewhere between an excuse and a rationalization, that there's intellectual stuff behind this. There's theology, there's philosophy. But the problem is, if you understand the philosophy, it starts to fall apart the second you look at it. That, why is sex for that one thing? The human race has evolved differently from, let's say, dogs that will only have sex when the female is in estrus. We have sex like bonobos.
Why do they make it feel good? If it's just for that purpose, why would they make it feel good?
Erogenous zones, so we can continue, so that you can procreate in one.
So then the Catholics, like Father Oblivion would say, well, you're sort of missing the point. You can have fun with it, but that's not the main.
I never missed a pint.
That's not the main purpose of it. Good old Father Oblivion there.
But that's all control. I feel like ways to control people. It's hard. You have so many people. You got to put the fear of God in them or something, or else it would just be madness.
I always had that philosophical urge, which was like, I understand your argument, and I think it's bad. And the thing is that it is bad. It doesn't. Philosophy has sort of taught me that when people believe something and they're willing to stake their life on it, or their actions or their career or their relationships on it, they should, when called to account, be able to defend it by giving reasons. And they have to argue their case on the merits. And I mean, this is something, at least, that Catholicism, and certainly the Jesuits, where I got my PhD from, insisted that you have to argue your case on the merits, that there's, your conscience has to be informed by reasons. And even if I think your reasons are wrong, you have to act on it. Well, I thought their reasoning was bad. And so actually do a lot of, Catholic theologians. They can have an argument about it. I mean, one of the things that unnerves me about the situation of trans people now is that the real heavy opposition that's religiously based against trans people, does not come from the Catholics as much as it comes from certain types of evangelical Protestants, for whom any kind of like real theological tradition of giving reasons, evaluating them, and if your reasons turn out to suck, come up with better ones. And I mean, this is what's going on in Alabama today, that they're voting to basically eliminate any kind of medical care for trans teens.
Why do people care so much? That's what I just don't understand. What's it to them? Like, I just don't get it.
I mean, I don't exactly get it either, except I think a lot of them really do believe in a kind of theocracy, which is that you live in a corrupt nation state unless it's run on Christian principles. So like they really are kind of like,
you're harder to control.
Yeah, but I mean, they're really like the Taliban were in Afghanistan, which is like, they want an Islamic Republic. If you're a woman, you have to be chaste, which doesn't mean being chased by some guy.
Yeah, I know.
Broke you, and if you're not, you get stoned. And by stoned, I don't mean, nice reefer. And that men have to wear beards and that women can't be educated.
Like,
and all that stuff.
Why? Like some of this stuff, it just makes me wonder. It just makes no sense. And I just wish I could get a reason for it to better because sometimes I can say, oh, okay, I can see where you're coming from. Maybe, probably not, but I just want just don't get it. I don't see what people care, what's it to them, because for me personally,
I think it's fear.
I feel gender is, well, at least in my experience, gender is fluid almost. It's like, as a little kid, they used to call me a tomboy. Why? Because I like to do certain things, that I found fun. And honestly, when you look back at it, it's almost sickening, because when you look back at it, they basically called you a tomboy to try to lower your self-esteem. It's like, wow, you really, for a girl, you really are out there. And it's like, no, that's putting labels on it and things like that. So it's pretty interesting. So I don't I just don't get, I'm sure I'm not the only one.
I mean, here's my take on it. And that's, when people talk about normal and abnormal, there's really two senses to it.
I hate those words.
Right?
I
never want to be normal, please, never.
Oh no, in that sense, I would hate to be normal, and thank God I'm not, but there's statistical normality, which is, you take a population of things or people, you look at their characteristics and say it is, statistically prevalent that human beings are right-handed. Only supposedly 10% carry the gene for left-handedness. It's statistically, massively statistically normal for one's gender identity to align with one's gender assigned at birth according to perceived sex. All right. The baby comes out, the doctor holds it up, sees what's there, says it's a boy, it's a girl, like 95% of the time, that's the case. But the other sense of normal is that if you don't fit into that norm, there's something wrong with you. And I chose the left-handed, right-handed thing deliberately because my father-in-law, who was born in 1909 in Ireland, was strongly left-handed. And the nuns forced him to use the right hand because...
Oh, don't freak me out. We are 2 and 2.
It was perceived.
Yeah, they said left-handed people were perceived as evil. I just saw that today.
Abnormal is bad, and you have to change, because you just everyone writes with their right hand except for weird people. And I mean, of course, the result was
cool to be weird.
I am too. Now I'm sort of people will say, what happened to you? I got fabulous. this is why we're sort of at a nodal point with trans people, in that people are beginning to realize that, yeah, we're statistically, there are not very many of us. There's more than you would think, but there aren't that many of us. But it's not normal in the sense that, or it's not abnormal in the sense that, I don't know, if you're a schizophrenic, you can't function in the
Yeah,
world.
I'm trying to follow what your reasoning is, because I feel like that doesn't, like, so disabled people aren't the majority, so we can treat them any kind of way. Like,
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
saying.
What I'm saying is that negative judgment that is like, goes along with you not being statistically part of the norm is wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And the thing about gender is that it's both sex and gender are a lot more complicated than people think. There are a lot of intersex people, and intersex people may have XX chromosomes, they may have XY chromosomes, they may have XXY chromosomes, they may have XY chromosomes but lack a certain gene on their the X chromosome of that gamete pair that says, when the masculinizing hormones hit the womb, they don't work. So what you have are human beings that have vulvas, vaginas, clitorises, no uterus, and testicles where the ovaries should be.
Androgen, I think that's like androgen insensitive.
Androgen insensitivity syndrome. And there's actually a counterpart. So like, sex is a complicated thing. Biological sex is complicated. There's some theory that hasn't been really established, but it seems plausible that your gender identity is affected by not just merely genetics, but by what kind of hormones are in the womb when your brain is developing. So in other words, you may develop bodily as a male and psychologically as female.
Wow.
And it's also the same thing with gender. The concept of gender is, like Monique said, it's fluid. It's not a hard-edged concept. It's not like math, and even math concepts aren't like that either. Not all of them.
Yeah, that's
So
my thing. That's my thing, is that I feel like it's not we overcomplicate it. Like, it's not that complex if we just accept that it is fluid and be comfortable with that, and not think that it puts us into any kind of box because we're feeling a certain kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, my point is that, like, when I was growing up, the boxes were there, and for all I knew, those boxes were made of stone. That there's the boy box and the girl box. And if you wanted to get out of the boy box and you were assigned male at birth, then you were gay, and that had to be nipped in the bud.
See, oh my gosh, this is so funny, because when I was lucky, I guess, because I grew up in a time where people were trying to like test boundaries and see like what the next step would be for society. And there was this movie I'll never forget, and I felt seen, and I was, like you said, probably around 5 years old or something like that, and it was called Just One of the Guys. And it's like the girl had a crush on a guy, but she didn't know how to meet him or something like that. So she ends up like dressing up as a guy in order to meet him.
Hang out. Yeah.
And hang out and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, like, and I never really understood, until as an adult, like looking back at that, like I was like, why was my energy so, like, why was I so excited about that? And I think it was like, because it was a visual, like a representation to see that, like, yeah, it's not that simple. Like, just because you're expressing yourself in this way, or your soul, which I want to talk about too, feels a certain way, like, why do I have to be put into a box?
Yeah. Because a lot of social systems, that sort of becomes, unfortunately, second nature. that, we have these categories. And if you're going to have categories, there have to be sharp lines separating them. And I mean, again, studying philosophy, I mean, one of the things it's taught me is that just because, a line is there doesn't mean it's not fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of fuzzy lines. And the opposite holds true. Just because a line is fuzzy doesn't mean it's not there. When I used to teach philosophy in college, I would say, remember, well, I used my old name, my dead name then, but remember Nelson's first law, which is there is one and only one simple truth, and that's that things are complicated. And then they would all roll their eyes like, oh geez, dad joke. But it's true. It's true. And I think people are always going to they're always going to be tempted to oversimplify. What's needed is from time to time, you need to step back and say, sometimes it's, am I overthinking this? And sometimes, am I underthinking this? Am I not thinking enough about this? Am I really making things way too simple? And I mean, the problem with the 1960s view of sexuality and gender identity was that, the lines were held to be, sharp and solid and impenetrable. Most people don't think have that too bad of a problem with that, but I did. I had a very big problem with that.
So what changed in society to cause that? Because gender wasn't always that defined.
The social acceptability of gays and lesbians came about because people realized, I know these people, and they're wonderful. That's that's cousin Bobby, or that's my niece Janine. What's happening with transgender people is that, but it's also the like social media and the internet have made us a lot more visible.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more visible. I mean, I really am glad for Twitter. I mean, I do not shit post on Twitter because it's just like, I don't see any reason for it. It's you'll only get people pissed at you. You'll only attract trolls. That's like mud wrestling a pig. You always lose, you get dirty, and the pig likes it. I don't see much use in Twitter except for keeping in touch or finding people who have similar interests or similar life histories.
How do you do that? I need a Twitter tutorial because I do not know how to use Twitter.
I'm not even on Twitter. So
I'm like, what is this? This is all random stuff. Like nothing makes sense.
I mean, it's mostly just random stuff. But I mean, one of the things that I find, one of its good points is that it's easy to find. For me, it's easy to find philosophy people, some of whom are, graduate students or people like me that just, perversely do it for fun. And some like big shot professors. I'm all friends with on Twitter. But it's also like trans people. I would not have met this many trans people if there was no such thing as Twitter. So it has its good points. And I think that's another reason why this is becoming why we're sort of at a pivot point with, I think, transgender acceptance and transgender rights and transgender politics. And I think there's a negative aspect to this too, and that's in the United States, the religious right needs a scapegoat du jour. And, they've already done the gays, and they've lost that in the Supreme Court, at least for now. We're the new thing, supposedly, although we're not particularly new. And in some cultures, we were considered shamans and stuff like that. I think that's also why in the United States, there's a lot of the discourse has turned to transgender people a lot more. In England, it's a bit different. In England, there are a group of feminists that are radically opposed to transgender rights. At least they call themselves feminists. That we're not real women, And I think they sort of miss the claims that we're making. We're not cisgender women. We have different histories and different stories. But I mean, I look at myself in the mirror now and I smile a hell of a lot more than I did before.
Yeah.
I am aligned with what I perceive myself to be.
Yes.
Does that make me either on a par with my experience is identical to a cisgender woman? Of course not. But that's not really that's not really what we're claiming. We're engaging in a kind of cultural politics that there are two types of women, maybe more. Probably a hell of a lot more. There's non-binary, there's gender fluid, there's
I was talking to a friend about that, about how people don't understand, because like in the spiritual circles and things, you talk about the divine feminine, the divine masculine, like your chakras and like things that happen, like when you were a child that may have redirected you. So for instance, a lot of times Black women get associated with that masculinity, which is why a lot of people lack empathy for Black women. So it's pretty interesting that, like, when you look at it from a soul level, like so I feel like that I don't know if you accounted for this when you were speaking earlier, but I feel like there's some people who may have the chromosomes, they were born with all of this. There's no kind of scientific reason or chemical or anything. It's just their soul is aligned with that feminine. And then what's wrong with that? Like, why do I have to qualify why I am the way I am? And I feel like
right.
it could be a slippery slope when you start to, well, here but I understand, like, for validation and for acceptance.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's a psychologist I'm not that crazy about, but he had a very interesting concept. Carl Jung had this concept of the anima and the animus, which is that in every psyche, in every male mind, there is an aspect that is feminine, and he called that the anima. And in every female mind, there's a male aspect, which he called the animus, which are both variations of the Greek word for, no, not the Greek word. Oh my God, I made a huge philosophy faux pas. So Latin, yeah. Psychologically, the idea of being Black or white, male or female, pick your categories, is just not, it does not hold true on the psychological level. I think, it's a cultural change that's happening, that, the world is beginning to realize this. And the thing about cultural changes is that they take a long time, but, at some point you look back and say, you remember how bent out of shape people would get over someone being gay? And, my best man at my first wedding was gay. And, oh my God, some of the reactions to it was like, oh, he's very swishy. And I go,
I don't like that in a lot of places.
That's why he's fun. That's, I mean, it's, and like, even like silly little things, like, I wrote a piece about how I knew, when I knew and how I knew it, that I was trans. I guess I was about 5 years old, and I had two Spalding, like tennis balls, and I was throwing them against the garage door. And I'm tired and finished, and I go up to my bedroom, and my mother comes up with books. She was always buying me and my brothers books. And I was the one who actually read them, and I'd steal my brothers. And what possessed me, I was just being playful. I took the two balls and I put them under my shirt, and I go, "Look, Mom, I'm a girl." And she was like laughing a little bit. And then my father came in, and you can guess what the reaction was. Like, his second generation, no, third generation Queen's Irish accent. "Get them things out of your shirt. You're a boy now. Stop that right now." And I'm like, why? But it's fun. Even now I like it. I think if that happened now, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of parents that would do that, but there are plenty of other parents that would sort of say, well, that's funny, have fun, play.
Yeah.
Play around with
do that.
I've got two boys and a daughter, and they do all kinds of stuff because they're kids,
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. That must have been something to kind of have to keep that suppressed or repressed, like you said.
Yeah.
When you knew.
I mean, I'm lucky in that there's a term of art, I guess you could call it a diagnostic term in transgender studies called dysphoria, which is the idea that you feel completely disgusted by your body, by the way you present yourself in society, and you can't stand it. And like at some point, it's either I transition or I kill myself. And I never felt that. I mean, was I crazy about being Mike? No. Could I manage it? Yeah. I was married twice. And, I made the judgment, as long as you can endure this, put up with it. In a quiet moment when you're dreaming, you can, imagine yourself, to be, Marilyn Monroe or whomever, but, and then I had a kid, and, that was also a complication. And then my first wife died. My second wife, we got divorced. My kid moved down to Florida, but I had my father to take care of. And I mean, I couldn't do anything really taking care of my father because he was a mess. Then he died, and I said, well, I'm going to have to live by myself. And I find out, A, I like it, and B, there's nothing preventing me from owning it. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Because like I said,
Did you feel born again, like a weight released?
Free. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to. The biggest thing is looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, this is how I should have looked from the beginning. And this is how I want to interact with people. I want to relate to people this way too. But it's like, I don't have to keep the big damn secret anymore. And like the other thing is, I kept saying, oh, if people know my secret, I have to be prepared is that they're going to tell me, fuck off, you weirdo, you creep. And that hasn't happened. Like, I remember when I first came out to you, Monique, I said, I really do think I'm transgender. And by the way, I joined the Episcopal Church. And I remember you said something, I'm more confused about you becoming an Episcopalian. I go, really? Wow. All right. It is kind of weird, but
I hate people. I try. I'm like, I try to be so.
Love you too.
So spiritual, but people, they some kind of way, like, I just don't get it. I don't mean it that it means nothing to me, because of course it means something to me that you are living your truth and all of that. You're living as you are and who you're supposed to be. But it's like, honestly, it's, why do we have to explain ourselves to people? Like, I'm so sick of it. Like, I just don't get it.
It's for their comfort. I think that's what it is. It's other people want to be comfortable, and it's why they ask stupid questions. That's why they have to categorize every little thing. And I think that people hate and fear what they don't understand. Yet they don't take, a lot of times they don't take the step to understand. They don't care. It's different. I don't want any part of it, kind of thing. And that's with race, that's with gender identity, that's with religious, anything different from what they think is, normal, like you said earlier, Laura. So it's just people need to just chill out.
And again, here's another selling point for philosophy. Something that's important is that, when you're faced with something you don't understand, you have two options. You can either try to stamp it out, or kill it or ignore it or whatever, or try to understand it. And it always works out better when you do that. If you understand it, this does not necessarily mean that you're going to change your mind or embrace it, but at least
Right.
you understand it as something that people can choose, let's say in good faith, to like, for example, among a lot of Christians, it's like, atheism is looked upon as, well, these people, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah. Very
Understand,
condescending.
yeah, understand your position. Understand that they could be right and you could be wrong. That doesn't mean that everyone should, whenever they understand something, they should convert over to Buddhism or atheism or God forbid. Well, republicanism, I'll put that. We'll consider that later. Understanding is important, but it's also risky because you have to downgrade certainty as a value. We all want to be certain,
And
and
that's
I mean,
scary.
part of my one of my issues was I wanted to be certain. Am I really trans? Is this really where I want to go? It's this sort of quest for certainty above all will prevent you from understanding things. And it will constrain your life to a point that I wouldn't say you've wasted it, but you've missed out on a lot of important stuff.
Yeah. But isn't that just some kind of trauma response or some kind of, I don't know, if you're living like that and thinking, oh, it has to be certain, it's almost like that just one more thing. Oh, just one more thing. I got, if I do this, then this will be. It's kind of living in that condition, like if this happens, then this will happen.
Yeah.
Kind of living with attachments instead of just living.
And it's not, the thing is that it's, you're not going to find it anywhere. You're not going to find that like completely self-validating kernel of absolute truth that will explain it all to you.
Exactly. And you should be comfortable with that. Like, well, I believe.
Yeah, it's sort of like I believe this. I'm a Christian in the Episcopalian tradition. I have my reasons for going back to Christianity, many of which had to do with the election of Trump in 2016, interestingly enough. And I have my reasons for, when I went back not as a Catholic, but as an Episcopalian. And I can spell those reasons out. But I have no right to assume that they're everybody's reasons, or that everyone's going to accept those reasons. And that's the challenge. I mean, if someone, calls me to account, I can tell them why, that Catholics, are really have, the arguments that they have about contraception and homosexuality and transgender stuff are just, the arguments don't stand. They're bad on the merits, but they seem to like have doubled down on it. And then the main reason, though, is that they don't take worship seriously. I mean, that's why I couldn't go back to Catholicism, because you go on to Sunday Mass and everyone in the pews is waiting for the communion to be over so that they can rush out the door.
Like you're tricking God, like.
Yeah, and I'm like, then why do you bother doing this? It's like a mindless habit or something, or it's like magic. If I go to church every Sunday, God will put a little gold star on my report card.
You're guilted into doing it. If you don't go, then you're going to feel like crap. So you go and you kneel and you stand and you sit down and you shake hands and you get your host and you get out.
All the while you're thinking about, God, I hate
something else.
Brady.
It's so funny because I never understood that. Or maybe I'm mixing it up, but I remember in my like RCIA, like Rites of Christian Initiation or the Catechism class, they talked about you can't get into heaven by works alone. And I think that these people are, they're trying to do works alone. They're just in the, all right, I did this thing, so therefore I tricked God, and now I'm in. And I feel like that mentality, that way of thinking that, oh, if I do this again, that conditional thinking, if I do, then this will happen. It's almost superstitious in a way, if you think about it.
Yes. It confuses magic with mystery. It confuses being spiritual putting on a good show of being spiritual.
I can find that with several religions, though. I feel like that's not unique to Catholicism.
Oh, absolutely.
The performance of Christianity versus actually living the laws of God or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. But
I mean, I used to talk to people about Park Slope Buddhism, and which is a thing, this sort of like suburban, Buddhism, where, it's sort of, you do it because it's a cool thing to do, and because, it's like meditation, man, and it's not, all this like, rules and restrictions on sex like Christianity is, and I'm like, how much do you really understand about this tradition? Why are you really there? Why are you really there? I mean, this is not a new problem either. I mean, it's one of my favorite philosophers is this. I don't agree with him, but he's very interesting. This fellow by the name of Kierkegaard lived in the 19th century in Denmark, and the last things he ever wrote had to do with his contempt for the Danish state church. Like, everyone thought, if you show up on Sunday in your Sunday best and you listen to the minister preach, and you take communion once a month or whatever they would do in the Lutheran church at that time, and you were sort of like a good upstanding bourgeois citizen. You read the newspaper every day. Then you're a Christian. And he's like, that. No, you think you're a Christian. You think it's easy.
Mm-hmm. You're doing all the steps. You're performing the act of being, but you're not.
Right. You're not standing, as he put it, you're not standing naked before your God. It's like you make it look easy.
We were talking about this, I think it's on our most recent episode that's out right now, that came out yesterday. Like talisman, the way they don't really mean, like, for instance, I guess the rosary, you could say.
Yeah.
Like I think they really do mean it. But for me, I don't take it as, if I say this many Hail Marys or something, then I'm going to get this result. I think it's all the same. It's that I'm putting that energy onto this thought. And so I'm giving power to that thought. Like we talk about manifesting and like the law.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. But I feel like it's just a physical representation. So I'm having that tactile engagement as well.
Right. If it's a meaningful practice, that's one thing.
Exactly.
If it's sort of a rote, obsessive, if it's sort of like a rote obsessive behavior, you miss the meaning of it.
That's what I'm saying. There's no bridge because it's so
right.
in the old school, and they don't take in those kind of ancient wisdom type of thoughts where, why not say, yeah, it's really just to make you focus on this more. And when you focus on it more, your energy is going to be directed that way. And things are going to be better. Not that you're going to sit here and do it and you're thinking about dinner tomorrow.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, that was, again, and that was Kierkegaard. So that sort of thing with Lutheranism in the 19th century was that, people were like, you go to church, you show yourself, and you were recognized as like a good, solid Christian burger. And I don't mean like, something you get at Wendy's, a good, bourgeois Christian. And then, you go to work the next day and, you're a merchant and you cheat your customers or something. Exactly. But it's okay.
But it depends also on their intent as well. So we could think that they think they're tricking God when they're really trying to trick you. When they're
and
really
that's
connections and those customers and things like that.
That's something else Kierkegaard brings up, that there are some people that may seem to you to be just going through the motions, but they're really not. Kierkegaard calls them, calls them knights of faith. that they just seem like, ordinary, just ordinary folk, or, an ordinary, merchant or someone who works in a bank, but who really understands what it's all about. Yeah. And I mean, I think, it's, I mean, one of the things that I found, I continue to find kind of alarming about, the state of Christianity, and at least in this country, is how little people actually know about it.
Yeah.
Or any religion, how little they actually know about it. I had a kid at Sheepshead Bay High School that was just floored when I told him Jesus was Jewish.
I feel like that's a basic, like,
right? Like, y'all ain't reading. Like,
you're following this person's teachings and you don't know who he was.
He was floored by it. He was like, Jesus was Jewish. I was floored.
Well, he
by
wasn't
that.
Christian. He wasn't Christian.
No, he thought he was a Christian because he was Christ. And I'm like,
how?
Do you go? I said, do you go to church? He goes, every Sunday. And I'm like, then you were thinking about the football game when you were there.
Wow, that's sad. That's sad.
I feel like it's a setup. I feel like it's a setup in a way to control people when you think about it, because just think about it. Like, I remember growing up and I would be so like believing people online. I think I even tried, I sent like a piece of gum to somebody one time because I didn't have any money. And you know how they'd be like, oh yeah, send in your donation, there's prayer, we're going to pray for you and stuff. And it's like, these people are taking, there's so many, what is that quote? I know you know it. The massive men are quiet desperation, live their lives.
Right, yes, live their lives in quiet desperation.
And I feel like that's the secret sauce of snakes, like people who, snake oil salesmen, because it's like, people are so vulnerable out here and just, they want something.
And I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying this to be snotty, I think a lot of people don't know that they're desperate.
My life.
And they don't know that they're living lives of quiet desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's, again, here I am, evangelizing for philosophy, if that makes sense, is that it kind of forces you into the position of examining your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's, behold a woman. I mean, I examined my life, and I said to myself, like 3 years ago, I go, you own this, please own it. If it doesn't work out, you'll know it, but if it does, you'll never regret it. If you don't take the risk, you'll never know for sure. And know thyself. It's
such a freedom to just be yourself. And that's what I'm finding. Like, now I get the whole auntie vibes. I used to look at people and be like, oh my, the audacity. And now I'm like, it's great. It's like, life is great. It's just, if you have to just give up that need to, you can't control people. You think you can, and you think you can control their image of you. You can do everything that you think they would think is right. And you will stop something. So it's like, and you keep chasing these carrots, you'll never get anywhere. There's always going to be something to chase. So when you find that inner peace and like acceptance, then there's a bunch of freedom that comes with that. Anything else you want to talk about, Laura?
Just thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun. Let's do it again.
It was.
All right. Well, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing. And
yes.
All right. And ciao.
Love you. Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Good talking to you all.